arid forgotten land, there lives a group of coyotes. In the many different tribe of coyotes, they have to fight for resources. The place is already barren as it is. So this group of 5 siblings of coyotes are usually on patrol to make sure that there aren't any other predators around that will be competition for food. The leader is Tug. Tug is very smart, he's very wily. He is the one that is always on the lookout for any changes. Anytime the land changes, anything that's moved, he understands that sometimes it's the smallest details that you can miss that could cost you your life. It's what cost them their parents' lives. Noticing the shifting land and how there were always landslides and earthquakes is how Tug was able to keep his siblings on the move. The coyotes mostly stay to themselves. Mish, his sister, is second in command. She usually likes going out the longest. And unlike a pack of wolves, these siblings are really close-knit, but they don't necessarily have to stay with each other all the time. Sometimes they go out and hunt by themselves and try to find food. As a matter of fact, it's more efficient that way because, as Yote put it, it's actually advantageous for us to check many different places. That way we can keep an eye on the territory to make sure there are no other coyotes in the area as well. Well, one particular day, their lives would change. An animal started sniffing around the area. She had caught a scent. Unfortunately for her, everything smelled different, and right now she was just trying to find a place to find food. Her owners had left her out here, and she has no idea why. Her name is Murky, and she's a special type of dog because she has coyote heritage. She is actually a black lab mixed with a coy dog, and a coy dog is a cross between a coyote and a dog. The Labrador gene was actually passed down from her mother's side, and going up, her mother's father, a shepherd, was mixed with a German shepherd and a coyote descendant. That male coyote descendant, the shepherd female, came from a line of other German shepherds, purebred, but the male descendant came from a line of purebred coyotes. So looking at her genealogy, it is clear that that coyote gene has been passed all the way down to Murky. Her owners knew this, but they didn't do their necessary research. So as a puppy, Mercury was always hyperactive and did have a lot of those wild instincts. They always thought it was cute when she was a puppy. She was so adorable. Her little floppy ears would always be covered in some sort of mess until when she got older, she started killing things. Forgetting that she's actually a canine, the owners were distressed because they had let the behavior go on for so long, unchecked, untrained, that now that she's an adult, she's apparently too hard to handle. So they dropped her off in coyote country, thinking that that would be the best thing for a dog that has been hand-raised and domesticated her entire life. Murky thought that this was a test. Maybe her owners did this on purpose. Even though she was very worried at first, she just kept sniffing around the area because she was just enamored with all the different smells. She's never been out like this, and she just waited for her pack to return until it started getting dark. And Murky realized that, wow, my pack isn't here, my humans aren't here, maybe I should go and look for them. And she tried to look for them, but after a while, it just got too hard to track. In the dark, Murky would hear the voice of the coyote pack, many different coyotes as a matter of fact, because the coyote pack we saw at the beginning that I showed you, they're not the only coyotes in the area. However, they are the closest. As it got really dark, Murky got very worried, and she would growl, her hackles would be raised. She was ready to fight and scrap with whatever it is. Because of the German Shepherd and the Labrador and the Hound and the different breeds that she has throughout her history, she is a little bit bigger than the average coyote, but none of that matters because once you run into a pack of coyotes, that is a problem. One of the male members of the coyote pack was going off by himself, and he heard her and smelled her. Like, he notices when something is in his territory. So he goes out and he sees this dog. To him, it's a dog or a rival coyote. He doesn't really care. So he looks over, up and down her, and he goes in to sniff. Of course, Murky has never interacted with a coyote before. She's heard their noises before, but she's never actually been up close and personal with one. Yote quickly snips at her and waves his tail in her face, and of course this gets her going. She's very scared and standoffish because she doesn't know if this other strange smelling dog in her mind means to hurt her. Yote is very playful. He does the play back wow, and every time she charges after him, he runs away. And she finally gets fed up with it and starts chasing him, and he leads her deeper and deeper into the desert arid area until they go through a settlement of rocks. He lets out a cry, and Murky is so distraught to see the sight before her next. 4 other coyotes are now standing at attention, growling at her and completely surrounding her. Yoda's very pleased with himself because his whole idea was to lead Murky back to the pack. He can't take her by himself. So he led her back to the pack thinking, oh, this is fresh meal. We're already low on food, and this random thing comes in. It's not really a coyote. They know that. So it can be eaten. Coyotes are impartial to eating anything that they can find, so it doesn't matter what it is. As long as they can overpower it, they can eat it. Murky, completely surrounded, is just beside herself, and when she tries to take off another direction, Mish, the female coyote, bites her in her haunches. An all-out brawl ensues, and as she is fighting Mish, the other coyotes quickly come in and take turns biting her and ripping into her. Murky is not going down without a fight. One thing that she knew about herself, and that her owners also knew, is that she was very scrappy. She quickly bit down on Yote's back of his neck and started shaking him around and threw him away. The other 4 coyotes quickly dove in. Dax is very young and inexperienced, so when he dove in, he wasn't aware of her large jaws and she bit down on his mouth. He quickly squealed in pain and used his 4 paws to try and scratch her off. The other coyotes at this moment in time, because they're trying to help Dax, are biting into Murky, but she wants to break his face. She knows if she lets go, the cycle is just going to keep continuing. So being the kind of dog that she is, she's a high tolerance to pain. She's like, I do not care what you guys do to me. I am crushing his freaking mouth. Eventually, Dax gets free and the other coyotes descend on her. Every time they bite her, Murky yelps because they're attacking the same places over and over again and making new wounds on top of that. She looks at Tug and she decides that he is the biggest threat. So she charges straight for him, and both dogs are standing on their hind legs, biting each other's necks. And there's a few times, because Murky is so large, that she's able to get Tug down on his back. She stands over him, starts ripping through his throat. The other coyotes are trying their best, and they're finding that it's pretty difficult to keep Murky down, but then they start to overpower her. Murky knows that she can stay here and fight and get mortally wounded, or she can run for it. So she runs for it. She breaks free. This is something that the other coyotes did not expect. Tug orders the others to go after her, so they all start running after her as a pack. Mish is the fastest, so she goes after her and starts biting her haunches. Murky does not look back. She is running as fast as she can, but the coyotes are still on her, and for 15 minutes straight, as tired as she is, the coyotes are still on her tail. They will not give up. It's just ridiculous how fast and how well they're able to keep up with her. If it were not for her coyote genes and the fact that she got a lot of exercise from the home she was in with her backyard, she would not have been able to keep up. She would have not have been able to get ahead of them. Her legs are also much longer, but the coyotes have been running faster and longer and harder for their entire lives than she has. However, there is one thing that Murky has on her side. These coyotes are very strong, they have very high endurance. However, Murky is very well fed, at least her owners did that. They fed her very well, so she has a lot more energy. And the coyotes start to realize that if we keep chasing this freaking dog, we're gonna run out of energy. And we should have caught her by now. This is ridiculous. So eventually they stop and they just decide that, you know what, she'll come back, or we'll just follow her and track her down. Anything that she kills, if she does kill anything, we'll just take it. And so the coyotes do their little coyote noise and they steadily go back to their den. In the night, Murky licks her wounds. She is shaking and trembling, tufts of her fur falling out where the coyotes grabbed it, and she's just so scared. By now, she realizes that her humans have not come back, and she's worried. She feels so abandoned. She calls for them. She howls, and she just doesn't know what to do. She's so afraid. Why would her pack leave her? Are they lost? Are they hurt? Does she need to go and find them to help them? If that happened to her, then it's possible that those coyotes or something else might have hurt her pack as well. As far as she's concerned, her pack is mortally wounded or they're hurt. So she still tries to find her way back home, but she keeps on going around in circles because the smells are now getting all mixed up. She's not accustomed to this. And it's very scary because she can hear other packs of coyotes in the distance, and it sounds like those packs are much larger than the ones that she just faced. Being an intelligent dog, Murky decides to stay closer to this pack of coyotes. Over time, Murky lives alongside the coyotes. They would always chase her away. They don't like her. They would try to kill her. But then they realize, she's very annoying. However, she is staying alive out here. She must have a source of food. It's been weeks since Murky's been out here. Surely enough, Murky, who is very good at catching small prey, she knew exactly what to look for. Her nose is very good, just as well as the coyotes, and she is able to catch her own food. So the coyotes started tailing Murky again. She would always run away, but this time they weren't trying to attack her. They were trying to see where she was finding her food, and it would just be at these random spots. Murky noticed that the coyotes were no longer trying to hurt her. They were literally just trailing her, and whenever she dug up something, it was an old carcass, the coyotes would rush her quickly and take away her food. Murky was very hungry, but she was still getting her food from something, and it were just little dens all over of rabbits or different types of creatures that would live in these areas, and the coyotes knew about it, but for some reason they couldn't catch it. Murky was an expert at this. About 2 months later, something strange happened that Murky never imagined would. The coyotes probably didn't imagine it would either. Murky went into heat, and this was something that the male coyotes just could not resist. They started acting right around each other, and funny enough, she did have that weird coyote smell. It was in her genes, but more than that, she had that female dog smell. Now, they still considered her to be food, but there were mannerisms that she had that were very coyote-like. And so against all odds and just from pure luck, Tug took a liking to her. Murky, of course, did not trust him. She did not trust his pack. But when they did surround her at some point, she was prepared to fight. They just sat around and let her get comfortable. She would charge at them, but not bite them, and would always keep her teeth bared. Eventually, Tug would catch some food, as they do once in a while, and instead of eating the food or sharing with his pack, he would growl at the others and then lead the female to his kill and have her eat it. When enough time has passed, throughout the mating, Murky started to find her behavior very odd. Despite what she felt, she started getting playful with Tug. She would do the play bow with him and bounce him with her body. Tug would also play back in return, but he was constantly fighting his urge to kill her and see her as prey or competition and to mate. And eventually, the mating side won over, and Tug mated with Murky. The plains are still very barren. After Tug and Murky had their litter of pups, it is understood that the rest of the pack now has to pull their weight. Something that Mish is not too happy about. Since the land has been very barren, Mish has been the one to accompany Tug, and even though they are siblings, they had become a mated pair. Resources are so limited that there aren't a lot of coyotes to go around, and the other pack that's actually an offshoot of their family is very aggressive. Where they used to have a tight-knit family unit before, now everyone is competing with each other. And their pack, the family that they left, they now have their own new set of puppies to deal with, so they can't afford to share with them. And unusually, it's as though that pack of family members who are related to their parents don't even recognize them as family members anymore. And then there's another pack of wilder coyotes that were migrating from another area. This place used to be chock full of stuff, but the resources are just about run dry. Murky has recognized this, and she stays home nursing the pups. She tries to go out hunting for the pups, as is normal for most domestic dogs to do. Whenever she would try to leave the den, Tug would go in front of her and basically question her, like, what are you doing? You stay and you nurse my children. I go out and I find food. The rest of us are responsible for protecting the den. Not to mention, there's been a female coyote that has been prowling around the area. She smells as though she's just given birth to pups as well. And if anything, she will try to not only take food or resources from her area, but if she has the opportunity, she'll quickly kill our pups. Understandably, all of this is a culture shock for Murky. Even though she does have a coyote background, she hasn't actually grown up with coyotes to understand the dynamics. But she quickly falls into the step. Truvai is the oldest puppy. His name means lucky find. But Bruin is the most dominant. His name means bear. As Murky is sleeping, her two pups, Truvai and Bruin, are always battling with each other. Truvai used to be bigger, but as they grew, Bruin would monopolize all the teat, and he would compete with Truvai. Sandbar was not even on the radar, a very mellow pup. A sandbar is a type of woodland deer, and so his name fits perfectly, because even though he is elegant, even as a pup, and majestic, he is very quiet and keeps to himself. Millie is almost a spitting image of her mother, and being raised with 3 brothers, she kind of goes along for the ride, and later on in life she will try to prove herself. And now, it is later on in life. The puppies are now old enough to leave the den and go outside the den. Murky has been leaving the den as well under the care of Tug's other siblings. Mish is not too pleased with these dogs, as she calls them, because in her mind, they're not really part of the pack. She was the mated female, but her pups died. Coyotes will usually disperse from their pack when they get old enough. These are very strange circumstances, and Mish and her siblings ended up staying together. Being very close to Tug, she mated with him because he was what was around. In coyote nature, they don't have the same morality as humans when it comes to incest. So when she came into heat and there were not many other options, Tug, being the dominant male, mated with his sister Mish without a second glance. The pups were healthy when they were born, but unfortunately, because of the low resources that they had, Mish could not feed them. She just simply wasn't making enough milk. This crushed her, and she lost all 6 of her pups. Whoosh and Dax would help to watch the pups and to guard the den while Tug was away looking for food. Yo would also do his own exploration. He was very wily and mysterious, and if he found any food, he would often bring it back. But most of the time, he was a transient coyote and would be gone for days even after the rest of the pack would come back. He loved watching the world around him. He loved spying on the other coyotes or other animals, and he would even venture very far into human establishments. One day, Yote had happened upon a little terrier mix. It was a very small dog, about a third or fourth his size. She was very wary of him and very scared. A huge gate separated them, and he would always call out to her, pacing back and forth the gate, watching her, wanting her. After a while, they became friends. Yote would talk to her, learn her language, and having never been mated before, the little female dog became infatuated with him. Her name was Ellie, and she explained everything about her lifestyle. Yote would just eat it up, just lying down, almost as though he were a human, lying on his stomach and putting his chin in his hands and wobbling his feet back and forth like he was just enraptured with what she was saying. Ellie would get lost in his eyes, and every time her owner would let her out, she would run straight for the gate, wanting to see her friend, Yote. After a long while, Yote would say he wished to hold her so they could play together. When she came into heat, Yote would spend all his time around her, being very careful not to have the humans detect him. All Ellie could see were stars in her eyes. She said she promised she would find a way to be with him. She would dig under the gate. He would also help her to dig, and he would ask her to try different parts of this very high gate. Then one day, he found something. He said, "Look, there is an area from inside your house that I think you can get out. It's a window, and it's partially open. If you can get up there, you can actually jump out, and it's quite a fall, but you'll land right here on this old mattress," which he dragged right under the window so she wouldn't get hurt. Ellie thought that was a great idea, and so she waited until her owner was asleep. The window was open because it was very hot there. It's like a desert area. There were fans blowing, but the window was hardly ever closed. But it was open just enough that she could fit through, and she was able to climb up on the counter somehow. Yote even was wondering how in the world she was able to do that. And she was able to put her paws on the windowsill and just fit her head through. Yote would be right outside waiting for her right by the mattress. And he would say, "If you come down, we can be together." His eyes were just dreamy and he was handsome. And she just thought that it was so cool that this large, wild, vampiric dog was just in love with her. Poor Ellie not realizing that if they mate, the pregnancy might kill her because the pups will be way too big for her to carry. But she wasn't thinking of any of that. She had no concept of what that even meant. She was scared, but Yote would wag his tail and make little chittering noises to encourage her, his eyes glowing in the dark. After putting her head through and her paws through, Ellie would put her back legs on the windowsill and push off to squeeze herself straight through. She almost overshot the mattress, but she fell right on it, and she was free. No more gates, no more barriers. She was right in front of her love. Now they could be together. Yote walked up to her and smelled her and told her how wonderful it was to see her face, like actually in person without any gates or anything blocking them from each other. She licked his mouth and she wagged her tail. Yote was just laughing and saying, "You have to be quiet because your owner will wake up." Ellie felt her heart just soaring. He nuzzled her and started walking away, and she followed him. When they got past the property line, Yote looked at her and said, "Are you sure this is what you want?" Ellie said, "Yes, more than anything." "Okay, as long as this is what you want." And he would walk off towards the brush with his new love, right before grabbing her in the back of her neck and shaking her so hard that her neck broke. But this didn't kill Ellie. She was still alive. She was still alive long enough to feel the horror of her suffocating, to feel the betrayal of who she thought was her lover, killing her and cutting off her airway. After he carried her to the brush, Ellie was still thinking to herself, maybe it was an accident. Maybe he's not really trying to hurt me. Maybe he just didn't know his own strength. But when Yote gets to the brush and he finally sits down, he lays down on all fours and starts ripping into her flesh as she is still alive and dying slowly. Poor Ellie can do nothing. She can't even cry. And after 5 agonizing minutes of him eating her, she passes away. Most coyotes wouldn't play this game. They're just in it for food. They're just in it for survival. If any of the other coyotes had gone out and killed other animals, which Tug and his siblings have done, they do it for survival. Yote, on the other hand, does it for pleasure. He finds a sick, twisted pleasure in outsmarting creatures, in making them feel as though they can trust him, and then killing them. There's just something so much better about the food walking into your mouth than you trying to get it. This way, he wouldn't have to worry about being shot by humans. He knew a few coyotes and has watched them, spied on them, as they've gone into human establishments and gotten killed or mauled by their dogs. Surely a lot of the coyotes were successful because, as he takes pride in his own kind, coyotes are very intelligent. However, he likes high reward with very low risk. He finds a certain pleasure and nuance in being able to outsmart his prey. And so, he usually preys on female dogs, especially ones that are still intact. He will have a rapport with them, walk around the neighborhood, get to know them, bring them little morsels of food to push through their fence. Even in the open areas where there are no fences and the dogs are let outside, he will still not attack them, but he will wait for them to follow. Yote always selectively picks the females, though, that he will get because he knows he'll have to be able to overpower her. But there is one specific moment in his life that he just enjoyed. He relives it every time. It's his best, most grandiose adventure ever. It is his most successful and proud moment. His victim, his amour's name was Candy, a young collie Labrador mix. Yote would watch her and would see her walking around her yard. No fence, no shock collar, nothing. She would see him at night and he could smell her from a mile away because he's been around there for a few of her heat cycles. And the crazy thing is, he's even mated with her. They even had a puppy together. Candy considered him the father of her child. And there is a time, or several times, when Yote would come and bring food. This explained why he was gone from his pack many, many days. It was usually when he was out on these expeditions and mating with these females. Candy had no idea she wasn't the only one, but at the moment, around this time, she was the only female. But Candy was very loyal to her owners and she would never leave the yard. When her puppy was about 10 weeks old, he would come out in the yard with her. She was very wary around Yote with the puppy and would not let him get close. But he understood and would always keep his distance and bring them trinkets. And after a while, Candy just got comfortable and she started playing with Yote. And I mean, they've already mated. It's not like they haven't already touched each other. She was way less wary of him when she was in heat, but she decided to go with him. And so they would go across the arid landscape together, just playing and having fun. And he would lead her to a beautiful area where it was very rocky. And it looks as though water had gone through the area before. And Yote would tell her about the history of the land. Whenever Candy would hear other coyotes, she would get very scared and skittish and want to run back home. But Yote always promised that he would protect her. So she stayed with him. Meanwhile, their son was back at home, missing his mom. She would sit by Yote and they would lie down together and groom each other as they looked over the horizon and just see the wide open landscape. Candy would always relax with him and they've kind of become companions with each other. And whenever she'd get up to leave, he'd walk her back home and make sure she got home safely from any coyotes. They never had an argument. They were never mean to each other. One can even say Yote actually fell in love with her. So it was very confusing when she was walking home And before she left the area, Yote slammed into her intentionally and pushed her down the cliff that they used to sit atop. Candy's a tough dog, but this cliff was filled with jagged rocks at the bottom, and even if she were rolling into the steep incline, she would get cut up and busted up on the rocks. Candy ended up breaking 3 of her legs, and as she's crying in pain, Yote would saunter down, because he's been down this rocky cliff before, and he would walk very slowly, matter of fact, as if he has nowhere to be, as she is trying her best to walk away, and she would just flop around on the dirt because every time she tried to get up, 3 of her legs are broken. She snapped at him, understandably, because she was in pain. It didn't connect in her head that he's the one that did this to her, but all she knew is she was in pain and she didn't want anyone near her. Yote would just sit there and look at her. He wasn't worried, he wasn't crying over her, he wasn't trying to groom her, he wasn't getting help. He was just watching her just flop around there until she stayed still because she couldn't go anywhere. She would just whimper. All Candy wanted in that moment was to go home. Yote would get closer and Candy would keep snapping, and they would play this game where he would try to get close to her. He would tell her, look, I just want to help you. But Candy couldn't understand anything he was saying. There was still also a language barrier there. She would pick up little things that he's saying, and she would get the general gist of it, but in this state of mind, she couldn't understand or comprehend anything. And he wasn't trying to make himself understood. He would just watch her with those enticing devilish eyes. And every now and then, he would bite her. She would snap at him, and now she was scared. Because she knew now he was trying to hurt her. He was trying to eat her. So he'd play this game of nick and duck. He would nick her, or bite her, or nip her. She would snarl at him, all the while trying to crawl back home. Every time she would get up the slope a little bit with her broken legs, he would wait for her to get halfway up, and then he would grab her tail and drag her back down. It was a game to him, watching her crawl towards the direction of her home. He would bite her, and eventually she would get too exhausted to move, and Yote would move in for the kill, eating her very slowly, keeping her alive long enough so the meat can stay fresh. When Candy didn't come home, Yote did return to her home. His son was still out there, and the son had become accustomed to his father being there now, so he wasn't afraid of Yote. The son would want to know where his mom was, and Yote would just reply, I don't know, and he left. He left to go back and be with the pack, and eventually he would come back and kill his son as well. Yote didn't just take pleasure out of killing those he tricked, but eating them. That coy dog pup, in his mind, was not his blood. It was his prey that he cultivated. He was so proud, because Candy was the biggest prey he's ever taken down, by sheer will, patience, and outwitting her. She didn't even know she had been part of the game. With all the other coyotes around doing this to survive, none of them had any idea what Yote was doing. They knew he was a killer, and that he loved to hunt and kill, but they had no idea to what degree. But Murky always had an eye on him. She didn't like the way he looked at her pups, and every time he tried to get close, she would snap at him and warned him to stay away, something that Mish did not like. Tug and the rest of the coyotes were very aware that this area was just completely empty when it came to resources. And having these new mouths to feed, it would be very difficult for them to even think about the pups when they themselves were starving. Mish would tell her brother that this place is no longer safe for us. We're going to die if we all stay here. Either we abandon the litter or we find someplace else. To which the others agreed. Tug also agreed, and since the pups were old enough to walk now, they decided to move away from their area. They went to another area of the desert lands, and Tug was relieved, because funny enough, there were sections of this land that had a little bit more vegetation. It was still pretty arid, but it had more resources than the previous area, and also less competition, which was very important. Unfortunately, Billy, the female pup, did not make the journey. The 3 boys, however, were still strong, although they were very hungry. Murky would go out with the pack, with the 3 pups in tow, and they would try to find food. They would feed on rodents, desert rabbits, foxes, and other things. Most of these creatures would go to the pups. When Mish went into heat, she wanted to mate with Tug, but at the moment, he was too preoccupied with trying to provide for the pups they already had. There's still barely enough food, he would tell his sister. We have to concentrate on these pups right now. Murky also agreed with this. Murky isn't necessarily monogamous, as most coyotes are, but in Mish's mind, she glared at Murky and she thought it highly disrespectful because technically she and Tug were a mated pair before Murky came in. Murky shouldn't be telling her anything, but Murky was now the alpha female. Mish feels as though she has unfairly been pushed out of that role. So one day, when the pack was out hunting, Whoosh was watching the pups. Mish came back from the hunting party very, very early. They weren't exactly out as a pack. Tug and Murky were together, but the rest of the coyotes kind of radiate out from the den and go on their own explorations to see if they can find anything to bring back for the pups. Mish came back early, and when Whoosh saw her, he stood up, basically eyeing her down like, where are you going? Mish, walking up to him, would threaten him, putting her head above his and baring her teeth with her mouth open. Whoosh, recognizing her as the alpha female, would move aside and would simply just watch as Mish walked up right to Truvai and snapped his little puppy neck. When Bruin and Sambar saw this happen, they smartly ran for the den. Mish went straight for them, but something erupted in Whoosh because while he recognizes her as the alpha female, he was not expecting her to kill one of the pups. And in his mind, even though he didn't like Murky either, the pups are also Tug's pups, and Tug left him in charge of them. So a huge fight breaks out between Mish and Whoosh. And of course, Whoosh, being larger as a male coyote, was able to overpower her. But Mish was very furious and very fierce, and she would continue to keep going at the pups. It would be a bloodbath, as Whoosh and Mish fought so hard that they both had really horrible scratches on their face. Dax and Yote came back, and Yote, of course, was looking at the carnage, and he's like, what is happening? And he would see the puppy lying on the ground. So he's like, you know what, we need to get rid of this evidence, because if they see that this puppy is lying here dead, they're gonna know it was you, dude. So he goes to eat the puppy to get rid of the evidence. Dax is watching, and he is just completely floored by this, because this is not something that's supposed to happen. This is not what the pack is supposed to do. Mish is sitting there like, yeah, eat it. And at that moment, Murky and Tug return, seeing Yote eating their pup. Yote stops midway and looks at them with half of the pup's body hanging out of his mouth. The rest of it's like gone. Tug just stares at him because he can't believe this is actually happening. He can't believe that his brother is eating one of his puppies and the rest of the pack is just sitting there and watching this whole thing go down. So Tug immediately starts attacking Yote and a fight breaks out. And of course, Murky sees this, and when she gets her ass into gear, she starts attacking too. So now Tug and Murky are attacking Yote and trying to actively kill him. Mish is also fighting them. Whoosh and Dax have no idea whose side to be on because they've never seen the pack actually fight amongst themselves in pack like this. Not to this degree. Unfortunately for Yote, being a much smaller coyote and having the hosts of hell upon him, he runs away and is banished from the pack. Murky finds her puppy's dead body, half-eaten body. The head is completely gone. It's only the lower midsection of the pup that's still there, and she's just howling in distress, and so is Tug. These are still his puppies. Bruin and Sambar run to their mother. When Mish moves, Murky gets up and she immediately starts growling at her. Bruin and Sambar tells her that their aunt tried to kill them. Their aunt is the one that actually killed Truvai. Murky already knows this because she could smell Mish's scent on her pup's body, and she chases Mish. Mish does fight her back though, but Murky is much larger. Using her body weight and using her two very powerful front legs, Murky grabs Mish and throws her down onto the ground, and then grabs her by the neck and starts shaking her vigorously. Tug is torn, however, so when Murky feels Tug tackle her off of his sister, she's very confused. Tug is mad at his sister as well, but he doesn't want to kill her. After all, they were technically a mated pair, so they have that special bond between them. Tug tries to explain that maybe, he should have mated with Mish as well. They had lost pups, and it's not fair. When it comes to survival, it's okay if there's less pups anyway. And Murky is just beside herself. She can't believe what she's hearing. All of a sudden, she is painfully aware that all the other coyotes are staring at her, even little Dax. And she realizes now in her mind, she is not one of these guys. It doesn't matter how much coyote she has in her, they will always see her as a dog. If she was purebred coyote and these pups were purebred coyote, would they have treated them like this? She doesn't know. But what she is sure of is that she's not losing any more babies. So she tells her puppies, come Bruin, come Sandbar, we're leaving the pack. Tug goes after her because he doesn't want her to leave. He actually cares about her. She's like, she's a good addition to the pack. She's a good hunter. But Murky's like, no, I can stay here and risk losing all of my offspring, or I can leave and help them survive. Tug doesn't want her to leave because she won't survive out there on her own. What's she gonna do without a pack? To which Murky reminds him very quickly she was doing just fine before she was a member of their pack. Mish mocks her and is very happy that she's leaving. She makes a veiled threat about killing her puppies if her puppies need something. Wish and Dax are just looking back and forth between them. Dax doesn't want Murky to go. In his mind, she's become a member of the family, but it is what it is, unfortunately. He has to stay with his family. Before Murky even gets a few yards away, Mish goes up and licks Tug's mouth. And since she's actually in the mindset right now, her body's actually ready to mate, she coaxes him into mating with her, which he does. Murky is so happy that she's leaving because these people are crazy. So she goes out with her pups, and she actually will survive for a while. Sandbar and Bruin grow, and when they're about 6 months old, they're helping their mom forage for food. Unlike the coyotes, though, Murky and her sons stick together. They go everywhere together. One night in the desert, Murky smells something. Her sons are sleeping, and she wakes them up by making a barking sound, and she looks out into the dark, and she sees some glowing eyes. Bruin and Sandbar quickly wake up, and they have more heightened senses than their mom, because they are more coyote than she is. So they're looking around, and they smell the air, and they let out that little coyote dog cry. Sandbar alerts his mother that he recognizes the coyote as Yote. Yote has been trailing them. Murky knows exactly why this is happening. Yote is probably here to exact revenge, to eat her pups, which are now much bigger, but he is still considerably bigger than they are. When Sandbar and Bruin grow, there's no doubt that they will probably be bigger than all the coyote pack. Murky growls and barks. Bruin also barks, and his hackles are raised, his head lowered, ready to fight. Sandbar is more of the shy one, with his ears back and his tail in between his legs. He is in a defensive posture. Yote knows he can't take them. He's merely spying on them, and he has made himself known for a reason. He simply watches them before bounding back off into the horizon. The next time Sandbar, Bruin, and Murky would see Yote again, it would be a very surprising event, because he wouldn't be alone. The next time they see Yote, he is with Tug and Mish, Whoosh, and Dax. Right after Murky left, Yote rejoined the pack, as if nothing happened. Of course he did. He's one of them. Tug looks at Murky no longer as though she is a member of the pack. Of course there's some familiarity there, but he no longer looks at her with that endearing look as though he is supposed to be helping her. He doesn't even look at his pups like that. He doesn't recognize them as members of the pack anymore. Mish has a very distinct smell, and Murky understands exactly what is happening. Mish's pups are still at the den, which makes her wonder who's watching them. The only reason the entire pack would be out here is if they're trying to bring down really large prey and they're desperate. Whoosh starts circling Murky and her family, as do Dax. Even though Dax looks as though he doesn't want to be doing this, his eyes turning away from Murky every time she looks at him as if he's ashamed. But Murky is not going anywhere. She growls, and Bruin is also ready for a fight. Even though he's still young, he's a scrapper, and he's taken down some big prey for his age. Sandbar, however, is scared, he is terrified, he wants to run away, but his mother orders him not to, being the alpha of their pack. Yote nips at them and bounds away right before Bruin is able to snap his jaws over him. Tug circles Murky as well, and so does Mish, and before long, the entire pack of coyotes descend upon Murk and her children. Murky immediately goes into aggro mode. She charges after Tug, who runs away from her, leaving her pups open. He does this on purpose, to draw her away from the pups, to divide them and keep them apart. Mish charges in alongside Whoosh, but what they're not prepared for is Bruin. Bruin has a strength of 2 coyotes, even at his young age. He is not as big as a full-sized coyote, but he is strong and very muscular. As Mish charges into him, he meets her with his teeth, and grabs her mouth and thrashes furiously. Mish whimpers and tries pawing at his face so she can get his jaws off of her mouth. Dax bites his haunches, and Whoosh bites his neck, trying to immobilize him. Every time one of them tries to bite Sandbar, he runs away, but he moves in trying to help his brother. He goes in to bite Mish's neck. The other coyotes charge after him, sending him away. Sandbar is just making noises and running around trying to distract everyone, which is not working. Bruin manages to fight them off, and there's an all-out brawl. Murky overpowers Tug momentarily before he gets back on top of her and thrashes her neck. While he's on top of her, she lays down on her back in a defensive posture to push her legs out. She makes a noise as if to remind Tug that she was once a member of the pack, that they had mated with each other. Tug just stands there over her, not attacking. He licks his mouth, his ears are back as he's watching the rest of the pack fight. He looks down at Murky, now straddling her. He extends an invitation. Let the pack feed on her children, and she can once again be a member of the pack, but she will not be allowed to breed. Murky thinks he's insane for even offering this. Kill her children so Mish's children can eat them and they can survive, and so she can be graced with being a part of their pack after all of that? She growls and kicks him off. He's stronger than he looks, and he once again straddles her and bites down on her neck. Whoosh comes in and tries to help him, the both of them now attacking her. Poor Murky is being attacked on all sides. Whoosh grabbing one of her legs and chewing down on it, breaking the wrist. She bites down on his face, narrowly missing his eye. He aggressively attacks her back. Tug is pulling at her neck, which is bleeding profusely now. Sandbar is just beside himself looking at all the mayhem. Yote sees him, and feeling confident, Yote gives chase after Sandbar. Sandbar is about the same size as Yote, Yote being a smaller coyote, but he has more confidence than this young one. And so when Sandbar sees his uncle giving chase after him, of course, he runs away, leading him away from the fight. Yote's sense to serial kill overcomes him, and instead of staying with the pack, he breaks away from them to hunt down Sandbar. Feeling the passion in his loins for another kill, to outsmart and outwit his prey, is what drives him to continue. Dax and Mish are still fighting Bruin. Bruin once again grabs onto Mish's mouth and chomps down on it hard, scratching at her face and kicking at Dax, who was behind him. Dax has become his own good fighter, but Bruin is much stronger and much faster than the both of them combined. Mish cries out a horrible cry. This grabs Tug's attention, who quickly stops attacking Murky and looks up to see what's going on with his sister/mate. Murky uses his opportunity to kick him in the balls and grab at his throat and chunk down. She launches herself off the dusty desert floor and gains the upper hand on top of him. Wish tries to break her off, but being crazed, she has no will of stopping now. She quickly chomps down on Whoosh, who jumps out of the way, before chomping back down on Tug. Tug kicks at her and bites back, the both of them thrashing each other, Tug hanging on to a section of her back and her hanging on to a section of his neck. Whoosh grabs one of her floppy ears and rips it right off of her head. Murky howls in pain but continues attacking Tug. Bruin, with a crazed look in his eye, runs straight for Dax, who flees. However, Bruin catches up to him and grabs his tail, pulling him back. Mish is still reeling over her hurt mouth, pawing at it in agony. She can't close her mouth completely because of the sudden swelling, and within that time, Bruin overpowers Dax, who is now racked with fear and crying loudly. Bruin tears into his throat. Dax attempts to escape by biting back, but Bruin does not appear to feel any pain, living fully up to his name, Bear. Dax rolls onto his back with his tail tucked between his hind legs in order to kick with all four legs. This is advantageous for Bruin, as Bruin's jaws are now fastened around Dax's neck. He bites harder the more Dax struggles. Mish, seeing what is happening, bites into Bruin, pulling his thigh with her jaws, which she cannot use at full capacity. Realizing this is having no effect, Mish runs circles around Bruin and tries to use her front paws to shove him off of her little brother. Bruin's body quickly gets shoved to the side, but his jaws remain clamped very tightly around Dax's throat. Mish then aims for his eyes and tries to bite down on Bruin's face. But every time she aims for his face, the young coy dog thrashes his head violently, which causes her to lose her grip and does more damage to Dax's throat. Eventually, Dax stops moving and dies from suffocation. Mish is maddened by this, but Bruin, realizing he has killed Dax, quickly turns his attention to Mish, his ears pointed backwards, his eyes alight with fire, and attacks her full on. Mish fights desperately and angrily, understanding full well that her pups are depending on her back home. So Mish calls out to Tug for help. Murky is losing her stamina, but she is still fighting, and eventually Whoosh and Tug are able to immobilize her. However, when Tug sees that Mish is in trouble, he quickly leaves the fight, unclenching his bloody jaws from Murky's bloody neck and leaving Whoosh to it, while going towards Bruin. Mish is still fighting Bruin, but she is using mostly her paws because her jaws are damaged. Bruin sees Tug coming straight for him, and when Tug runs for him, he quickly stops, kicking up dust as he slides to a halt. Bruin lowers his head. His jaws are also bloody and dripping. They circle around each other momentarily, father and son. It's unclear whether or not Bruin recognizes Tug as his father, but Tug does remember the smell of Bruin. Bruin had a very potent smell, and he still does even now. Even though the pup is only 6 months, he wears his skin and moves like an adult. Tug quickly looks over to where Dax's dead body is lying. It is unbelievable that his son, a young coyote, well under a year, was able to dispatch Dax, who was still bigger than him, while also fighting off his sister. Tug is wary. Whoosh is still fighting Murky, who has reinvigorated herself and gets up and starts fighting him. She snaps her jaws towards his face and quickly runs to be beside her son. Bruin and Murky alongside each other face off against the 3 coyotes. Tug realizes that they're now outnumbered. Even though he still has Whoosh, Tug can feel the tiredness in his bones. And Mish is a nursing mom with a damaged jaw. Bruin still looks like he is ready to fight the entire pack 3 times over. Murky is exhausted, but she will die before she gives up a fight. Tug lets out a coyote call, and he calls the rest of his pack away. Mish is very angry about this. Her eyes flash with rage as she quickly charges for the throat of Murky, who grabs her mid-air and slams her down. Mish overpowers her and bites her in the neck. Murky is so weak from the fight with 2 males that her muscles just can't take anymore. Right now she is mostly bark and less of a bite. Even with Mish's damaged jaw, Mish thrashes her head to and fro while holding Murky's leg and then neck in her mouth, a natural movement that now gives her so much pain. Mish is quickly dragged off of Murky, something hanging onto her tail, and at first she thinks it's Tug, telling her to stop the fight, but to her horror, it's Bruin, her nephew. He bites down into her tail, feeling bone crack. Putting one of his paws on one of her hind legs, he grabs onto her foot, keeping the thigh stable, and then pulling upward, causing Mish's back leg to break, or at least dislocate. Mish cries out. Tug and Whoosh quickly charge after him and snap. Bruin doesn't back down and is ready to fight them all. Murky stops him. She knows, looking at her son, that he will die before giving up a fight. He will fight himself literally to death. He is bleeding, and because of his stance, it's hard to see exactly how hurt he is. He's not limping, but all of them are. Mish realizes she's too damaged to fight. As much as she hates Murky, she limps away, with Tug helping her. Whoosh looks back at them, relieved to stop the fight. He lets out a call, waiting for Yote to join them. They had been calling for Yote, but he was nowhere to be seen. Whoosh, Tug, and Mish head back to their den. Murky licks Bruin's face, and this is when she realizes that Sambar's missing. Sambar still being chased by Yote, being chased to the same area where Yote had killed Candy. He has an idea. He knows that Sambar's never been here. If he can chase him to the same cliff area, he can kill him quite easily, since the pup is so stupid and cowardly anyway. Yote chases Sambar right into the area of the cliff. As Sambar looks over the cliff, he realizes that it's cut off, and he tries to run past Yote, who cuts him off and tries to get him to go for the cliff. Sambar starts making a very loud coyote noise. Yote knows that his family isn't coming to save him, at least not anytime soon, because his family's too busy fighting, and they're probably losing that battle anyway. No one is coming to help you. You're all alone. Sambar charges into Yote at a last-ditch effort, and Yote quickly fights him, invigorated by his desire to kill this pup. Yote grabs him by the throat and quickly throws him down, beating him with his paws, causing Sambar to jump back, realizing that he is not a fighter. He can't fight Yote. Even though Yote is a smaller one of his pack, he's still definitely a better fighter than Sambar. Sambar cries louder still. As Yote inches forward, Sambar cries more. And the more that Yote goes closer to him, is the louder he cries. Of course, Yote is wondering, what is wrong with this idiot? And he prepares to charge into him. But first he tells Sambar to sit down, so Sambar does. Yote flicks his tail, the desire growing within him to throw Sambar off the cliff the same way he had Candy. But then Yote hears something. It's a growling noise behind him. At first he thinks, oh, probably Murky. But when he turns around, he pisses himself when he realizes what is standing before him. What he quickly realizes was the reason Sambar had been crying so loudly. To Yote's terror, he sees a large pack of coyotes snarling at him. This was the aggressive pack of wild coyotes that had migrated to the area. Yote snarls defensively and looks behind him to see if he can see Sambar, and Sambar is gone. Where he went, he has no idea. That coward. Yote growls and warns them not to come any closer. Sambar watches from a distance as the pack of 40 coyotes descend upon Yote, ending his reign. Murky and Bruin spend about an hour trying to find Sambar, and after a while of Bruin calling out his coyote cries to his brother, he hears them in return. They both see Sambar running towards them, and they run to meet him, Murky so happy that her son is alright.